I want to introduce the people. First of all, Simon Clough. Now, Simon is the former Deputy Mayor of Lismore City Council. He's a two-term councillor, but importantly for this discussion, he was a coordinator of the gas field-free Northern Rivers project. And Simon's particular interest is basically that kind of municipal, collective, community organising and how you can achieve environmental outcomes through those mechanisms. Next to him is Tony Pfeiffer. Tony Pfeiffer is the Managing Director of Enova Energy, and we'll get Tony to explain why Enova is particular. Then we have Amelia Hicks. Amelia is a grassroots activist whose most recent campaigns have involved no sand mines in Lennox, and she's particularly interested in the way that as an organiser you increase awareness, education and interaction between people who want to participate. Next to Amelia is Sue Higginson. Sue's a lawyer specialising in environmental issues. She's the former head of the Environmental Defender's Office, and just so we're clear, she's now the endorsed candidate for the Greens for the state seat of Lismore. And of course, sitting next to Sue is Will Steffen, who you've heard before. Could you please welcome all our panel? I am going to start just by giving each of the participants a chance to kind of locate themselves in the discussion. And so I'm going to start again with you, Simon, and then come back this way. Can I get your reaction to Professor Steffen's presentation, and from your perspective, with things like gas field-free Northern Rivers, what did you draw from it?
Well, I have to say, it's profoundly challenging. I think that's pretty obvious. But I'm of the view that this is a truth we need to know and to start from. And I guess it takes me back to some of my experiences in the anti-Vietnam War period, where we absolutely believed that the Vietnam War was going to continue, Australian troops were going to die, and we were possibly in a conflagration with China. And that changed. And it changed dramatically because people across the country contributed in every possible way. You know, we had Save Our Sons, where mothers fought conscription. We had students out in the streets. We had trade unionists. We had every shade of person out there shouting to try and stop this war and to stop our 20-year-olds being conscripted and sent off to die. And it worked. It worked. It was an incredible commitment of resources, but it worked. And I guess I draw some hope from that because I've seen what social movements and communities can do when they actually fully engage. And I think briefly of Ian Dunlop, who has done a lot of work in this area, and he talks about going on a war footing. And he's got amazing figures of what countries have done, for instance, during the Second World War, in terms of totally transforming their economies to the challenge that was facing them. So I just put those couple of examples out that this is possible. And what we saw with gas field-free Northern Rivers in this current era is that it is possible to get a government to completely capitulate, to pay $25 million to buy back fossil fuel licenses and basically pack up the camp and go away. So we can do it, and people here did it. And I congratulate everyone that was involved because we have that sort of ability as communities and as human beings.
Thank you, Simon. That's an optimistic way to start. Tony, as you give your reaction, can you also explain the particularity of Enova?
Absolutely. And yes, my reaction, very similar. Sort of, I think the outcome is we don't have time to dick around and think about it. We've got to do something now. You know, we really have to take charge. And listening to what Simon was saying, I think talking now a bit about Enova and potentially talking to the converted here, and with the gas field free, those who have seen the movie, The Bentley Effect, which of course was about that movie, there's a portion when they're getting near to the end of the movie and they're sitting around the fire up at Bentley at the blockade, and they're talking about, we can't just say no, we've got to find a different solution, we've got to find an answer. And part of that discussion was, well, we've got to find an energy answer that is zero carbon. And out of that movement, partly out of that movement is how Anova was born and how this community decided we need to do something different, particularly in our energy side of it. And so Anova was born on the basis of being a community-owned energy retailer that's here to service the community of the Northern Rivers, to provide services that are aimed at reducing our carbon emissions through our energy sources by sourcing more and encouraging more renewables into our environment. We're only a new organisation. We're only just 2 years into being commercial in the business community. We're still working very strongly in the Northern Rivers community. We've been established not just as a commercial venture, we've been established as a social enterprise so that we're actually giving back into the community as well as sort of helping the community achieve these carbon neutral goals. And through our not-for-profit arm, half of our dividends go back into that not-for-profit arm for reinvestment into the community and assisting the community for those who can't access renewable energy, for larger scale sort of renewable investments. As a 2-year-old company, we still haven't made huge dents in that area, but that is really what we're on about. One of the actions that we're doing actually in conjunction with Quorum and ZEB is Repower Byron. And it's a project that I'm really passionate about. That's actually being operated through our not-for-profit arm. And it's got 3 mantras, and the 3 mantras are switch. So switch yourself to an ethical provider. Make sure that you're doing the right things by an ethical provider because, as I said at my opening statement, we don't have time. And if you're going to worry too much about, well, if I can't do it today, I can't do it tomorrow may be too late. Look to reduce. Now, Anova offers services in relation to our home energy coaches. We can help you understand what you can do to reduce. So again, that's a service we're offering to the community. And then the last one is produce. If you can afford solar, if you can involve yourself in the renewable processes, let's start producing more. And that's where, again, as an energy retailer, we're trying to encourage that through higher feed-in tariffs and the like, and really support the community.
Great, thank you. Amelia, so you're, as I said earlier, you're particularly interested in really bringing a community which can be very diverse to a common purpose to achieve an outcome that will benefit them. What's your sense? Did Professor Steffen's presentation make you feel glum or inspired?
I literally wanted to cry, but that's a good thing. I think that, there's certain emotions that cripple your ability to act, and that's sort of despair and fear, and a few others. But we need to start from an informed place, and I think that's what Will's talk, it reiterated a lot of that science and a lot of what we know already. I guess for me, the really important thing is that I don't personally stay in that place. And that we do take action now. So I think I could agree with Simon that we can't sometimes see that it's possible until it's done. And it's really just about working every day because there's no other option, really.
Great, thank you. Sue, the environment certainly needs defending. Do we have the legal structure that's going to make that happen?
No, not at the moment. We really don't. So the things for me is... with Will's brilliant presentation is that I think all of the things that everybody's being encouraged to do are resoundingly profound and brilliant, and we all have to do them. All have to get on board. We all have to support our Anovas. We have to join our public mobilised actions. We have to meet together. We have to keep getting informed. But the level that I'm most engaged in is it's not the personal culpability or the personal liability that is going to change this at the rate and the acceleration need that we have. We do need systemic institutional change, and the way we get that is actually through our system, our government system, and we actually need to recalibrate significantly right now. Our environmental laws are tragically failing us. Our parliaments at the moment are not representing us properly. We're really fortunate here, and I acknowledge my colleague Tamara Smith. We actually have one Greens member in the lower house for the Northern Rivers at the moment. I don't know if people saw Jeremy Buckingham's talk in Parliament only a couple of weeks ago talking about exactly this. He's looked at this. The difficulty I have is that I see this, and this is profound evidence. It's actually evidence, the sort of thing that you put in a courtroom and you expect justice to come out the other side. That's not happening, and the reason it's not happening, and I can tell you, because I have successfully sued Rio Tinto, I have successfully sued Yancoal, I have successfully sued Whitehaven, I have successfully sued a number of our mining giant fossil fuel generators, but they walk out the other door and they keep generating. So something is so drastically wrong when this kind of evidence is presented into our justice system and we don't get the right responses. And I know where that breakdown is. That breakdown right now is that, so New South Wales has, at the moment, more coal projects in the pipeline than the entire Adani, Carmichael, Galilee Basin. And not everyone's aware of that. Only at the beginning of this year and the end of last year, your New South Wales government bureaucrats were over in Canada and other developed countries talking about how good New South Wales coal is and how that market is going to continue. Our coal is the cleanest coal in the world. Please buy it. This is where our problem is right now. It's the New South Wales government, and we need to make a real change. And my final point with watching what Will's presentation delivers to us all is the whole thing is about humans surviving, and that's really important, but what about all the other things? What about all the other elements of nature? What about all those animals, plants that cannot speak?
Thank you. Now, for people who have questions, I'm going to ask you to come down to this microphone. And while you make your way, I do want to come back to Professor Steffen. I'm going to call you Will. Yeah. Today, when we were speaking before the forum, you made the really interesting observation about the Me Too movement. Yeah. In terms of the capacity of a society to make a big shift on a key issue that for too long nothing was done. Could you just elaborate on that?
Yeah, look, I think one of the interesting things, I talked a lot about tipping points or tipping elements in the Earth system. There are social tipping points. I think you heard one in the Vietnam War. It's another good example. We can change really fast, faster than people think. And it's classic because underneath things are building up. Nothing seems to be happening. And then there's a trigger. The hashtag #MeToo movement is exactly one of those, where some woman was brave enough to say, just call out and say, we got to stop this. And with modern communication technologies and just the right timing, it went viral and it's having an impact. We can do the same thing on fossil fuels. And if we could just do a hashtag no new fossil fuels, because all of those budgets I show you, we have to drastically reduce existing fossil fuels. But the first thing we have to do, just as what you were saying, is there's so many new fossil fuel projects on the book, they'll totally swamp the climate system. So we've got to put our feet in the sand, draw a line in the sand now, stand up and say, no new fossil fuels. And this needs to go viral around the country and in other parts of the world.
Indeed. Okay. I can only encourage you to ask questions. I ask them all the time. Here's a gentleman to come forward. That's terrific. If you could just let us know who you are, that'd be great.
If no one else will ask a question. So my name's Azrin Pugh, and full disclosure, I'm a Labor candidate for the seat of Ballina as well.
Thanks.
Look, one of the, I worked for the Australian Conservation Foundation for 3 years, fighting against the Adani mine and that kind of thing. One of the things, the challenges that we faced with mobilising people was exhaustion. People have been fighting this for a very, very long time. Despair, case in point. And also reaching out from sort of, I suppose, environmentally minded bubbles like Byron Bay. Like, how do we reach out into Casino and Grafton, those areas which actually decide elections? Anyone? Thanks.
Simon, would you like to have a crack at that?
Yes, I'd love to have a crack at that. Well, people believe that Bentley was a blockade. Actually, that was the pimple on the pumpkin. The pumpkin was the gas field free campaign. And that was going house to house, talking to people, talking about unconventional gas, what it would do, doing a survey, giving people DVDs. We talked to tens of thousands of people across this region. 147 communities declared, and declared's an important word. They didn't ask, they didn't petition, they said and declared, we are gas field free. And that meant that they dragged in senior people in their community, mayors, anyone they could find, and they gave them petitions, or they gave them declarations, saying, we are gas field free. And from that, we had an enormous base of relationship, of connection. To do that, though, exactly what was being said, we had to step outside the lefty, greeny bubble. You know, we had to leave behind ideas about, you know, you're a climate change denier, or you're this, or you're a member of the National Party, or whatever it is. And we had to concentrate on the common ground. We had to concentrate on the water, the impact of industrialisation of our agricultural landscapes. We had to concentrate on the loss of food, the impacts on air. And that got through. We had to change our messaging from stop fracking to stop invasive industrial gas fields, because people could get that image and that motivated them. That's how we were able to, when it came to the final end at Bentley, say to the police, who we had good relations with, we're looking at 8,000 to 10,000 people here. You know, you're bringing 1,000 police, what's going to happen? And I tell you, the police were very, very nervous. They went straight to the minister and said, we could look at serious injury to a lot of police and the community, and in all probability, a number of fatalities. Stopped it. They found the courage to stop it.
Can I add?
Please.
Azra, it's such a valid point and such an important question. I feel like I've had a really kind of privileged insight to grassroots communities and how they operate, and also organised environmental institutions. One of the things, and what Simon's saying is so fundamentally important, we need to mobilise, we need to build social movements, we need to get aware. But also what we need to do is move to this recognition of civil society as a valid institution. And the way we can actually do that is if we actually had our parliaments working for us properly, and if we had the momentum in our parliaments, we could actually legislate for the provision of civil society. Like, we can actually do that. So working for the ACF, I know what it looks like working for the ACF. You spend half your time working out how to fundraise money so you can function to do the things you want to do. You are constantly under the pump. You are facing unfair tax rules that disadvantage environmental charities alone. Right now, civil society has never been more attacked. And the reason being is because the wrong people are in the house. They're kicking the walls down and they're busting the joint, and they're not providing for civil society. How simple would it be? Someone holds that power in Parliament, and they're able to actually get legislation to empower civil society. There's an environment centre that's fully funded, set up in the middle of Byron Bay. There's one in Casino. There's one on the south coast. Like, why don't we have these community hubs? We've got all sorts of other institutions built in societies. We've got great schools. We've got well, perhaps not great schools. We've got schools. We've got hospitals. We've got all sorts of things. Why don't we have civil society-funded democratic institutions that do this advocacy work? I remember years ago, NCC used to get really good government funding to be able to be the community advocates, the voices to hold our democratic institutions to account. So I think it is fundamental that we all mobilise, but I also understand that takes hours and hours of volunteer labour, volunteer work, and sometimes we need to have some organised in civil society institutions that get a fair go and an advantage. And right now, it's so far from that it's not funny.
Thank you, Sue. Just to broaden that point out a bit, and I am encouraging people to come to the microphone, the idea of choice and necessity, and Tony, I'd like to go to you. Sometimes people on lower financial resources do what they have to do. Their lives are governed by necessity. Whereas people who are more affluent and who have more opportunities have that great luxury of choice. Can I throw that open initially to the whole panel, but initially to you, what is the kind of relationship between those that have choices and those that don't as far as climate options go?
Yes, and I guess from a Nova's perspective, the ability really then is about how to participate in the renewable revolution and to assist us to decarbonise, particularly our energy resources. And yes, it is a challenge, but that's again where I believe organisations like Nova, and at the moment I believe we're still pretty unique across the Australian energy landscape, are here to try and facilitate that for our community through, again, our not-for-profit arm. We've done work with North Coast Community Housing and with the Office of Environment and Heritage, where we've actually supported 32 families living in community housing with solar panels on the roofs of those community houses, so that they can now access the benefits and reduce their energy purchasing, but also then improve their carbon footprint on the planet. We're also looking at other programs that are going to work with the Office of Environment and Heritage where we can, and we're actually working very closely with them to try and encourage additional funding into this space, which will allow people who can't afford the opportunity to get involved. Because if you can afford to be involved, you're actually reducing your not only your carbon footprint, but your energy costs. And so this is one of those real, as you point out, a real dichotomy in that space. We're in the process of developing other products which we believe will assist in this space too, which will be the ability to provide solar and batteries at no upfront cost and things like that. So we're still working through those processes, but that's where we want to take it, so that we can provide equitable and social access to all of the society, in respect of the ability to reduce their carbon footprint and reduce their energy bills.
Will, on a global scale, is that choice-necessity dichotomy take on national characteristics? Are wealthy countries in a position where they should be doing more?
Yeah, there's a lot of discussion about that, and even just in the last 20 years, that argument is shifting. Yes, certainly 20 years ago, it was much more clear-cut. There were the OECD countries, large developing countries, and then the rest of the poor countries. And there was a general feeling that we needed to do more. We needed to act first, we needed to act decisively, and we needed to support poorer countries to be able to both develop and improve their quality of life, which is very important, but in a different trajectory than we used, the heavy fossil fuel trajectory. That's changing very rapidly with say, the rise of China. For example, per capita emissions now in China are about exactly the same as the European. So they're equivalent. But to be fair to China, they have almost led the charge whilst trying to develop flatlining their emissions for 3 years in a row. They crept up, unfortunately, in 2017. But for 3 years in a row, they were continuing to bring people out of poverty, and they at least capped their emissions. So they're making, I think, an honest effort under difficult circumstances to actually do their share, more than some OECD countries. So yes, I think those countries who have more resources, have more technologies and so on, need to act faster and need to support poorer countries at the same time.
Thank you. Sir.
Yeah, hi. My name is Joe. I'm not a local resident, but look, I often talk to people and I listen to people, and the words believe in climate change comes in, or the words deny. So I'm wondering if there's a way for us to use a new language, because we're going back into the whole thing of I believe in the Virgin Mary, or I believe in climate change. And the debate seems to sometimes, often, take the tone of a religious argument.
Thank you. That's a really interesting question, particularly in the light of the whole fake news debate. Who would like to take this on? Simon? And then I'd like to hear from you too, Will.
Yes, look, I think that's a very pertinent point. I do a lot of work with Lock the Gate. Lock the Gate, its mission is to stop inappropriate mining in Australia. We work all over Australia. And we don't mention climate change. We don't mention renewable energy. What we do talk about is land, water, air, landscape, and people's lives, and particularly their land, and the impacts on their land. That's enough. That's enough. Because that's what people are deeply committed to. And I would say it's one of the most effective climate change organisations in the country. But as I say, we don't talk about climate change. Not because we don't believe it's happening, but for exactly the reasons that you're putting forward. That it's divisive in the sense of particularly working in rural areas. We work with people who would be classified as rednecks to a lot of people here. We work with Aboriginal communities. We work right across the board. So we don't use the phrase climate change. And it's extremely effective. Perhaps we have to step up further on that, but there are lots of organisations who are working in that space, and they're doing some amazing work as well.
Thank you.
Frankly, I think it is really important. I think we should definitely keep working on, you know, the words of the narrative. But I also think we've won. I think we've won that. We're well and truly won. We've won. And we had what's his name? Our Prime Minister, Malcolm Turnbull. We had Malcolm. You know. Sorry.
I think it's pronounced Trumbull.
You know, we had Malcolm Turnbull on national radio doing his tour, listening to farmers who are really struggling right now. His whole message was, there's no denying, we all know it's getting hotter. We've won. Like, we're well and truly there. I think it's great to keep working on the language and the narrative, and yes, if you're talking to people that are working in the belief context, then you keep talking, but it's time for action. We've got 2 years. We've just got to get the right people in the right places to pull the right levers to make the right changes at the right rate.
Thank you, Sue.
I just wanted to add on to what Simon was saying, you know, in the No Sand Mine for Lennox campaign, which we've been running for the last 18 months, once we shifted that narrative around what people love and what they want to protect as opposed to what they don't want, that's when we really were able to see the campaign ramp up. So we started talking about people's love for the ocean, for our fresh waterways, you know, for Lennox in general. We were able to tap into the surfing community. So I think we as campaigners, which, you know, whatever term you want to call it, people who care and people take action, we do need to think about how we message this so that people can get on board. And if you can tap into what people want and what they hold dear and what you share in common, you will inspire them to take action and they'll join your cause.
Great. Thank you, Amelia.
Hello, my name's Alison. I am semi-retired and I decided I had nothing better to do with my time than to nag. And I've been a professional nagger. I managed to get an inquiry up on an unrelated issue. But what I've realised in doing that is that the government's almost irrelevant and a distraction. And that's the point I would make here. My experience is that the departments shut down the decisions. You get all sorts of irrelevant rubbish throwing back to you. And this is only going to change if people get angry enough. But I don't know what the mechanism is locally, particularly for people like me who love to do this sort of thing. I mean, I don't want to lead a campaign, but I've got time. And I'm just wondering what the mechanism is locally to do that. And I guess the other question I've got as someone who's just getting up across all of the information provided tonight is what is being said to shut down the debate by the government departments?
Thank you very much. Right off the top of my head, I'd say that talk to Vicky Brooke about becoming part of Zero Emissions Byron. It would be one thing you could do. But other people, who'd like to take on, what can you do?
I'm obviously going to start because I'm going to defend the fact that governments are not irrelevant. In fact, governments are so relevant, it's not funny. I've been working at that coalface in those institutions with government. I've been on resource advisory panels for the current Minister for Planning, the one before, the Secretary, the head of the department, all of the people who are consenting to coal mine developments. I've sat there. They are not irrelevant, I guarantee. They're the ones causing the pain, causing the harm and making the misery. And let's not forget, in terms of Bentley, in terms of coal seam gas, in terms of the coal seam gas-free Northern Rivers, At the end of the day, we all mobilised, we threatened, we went, we blocked, whatever, not quite blockaded, well, we did it, Glenugie, etc. We were there. But what was the final stroke that made McGasco go away? It was government. It was the institution of government that made it go away once and for all. So it's not irrelevant. Yes, it's painful. Yes, it gets in the way. Yes, the bureaucracy is an awful machine in the way that it's working. The reason it's like that is because we are following black words on white paper. That's what parliaments do. They make laws. They write black words on white paper, and at the end of the day, they are the words that matter. At the moment, we have the wrong words written on the white paper. And the way we change that is, and I'm not saying this is the only thing, this is just the role of government at the moment. The problem with just ignoring our institution of Parliament is there. It's actually quite a profound system. They are houses of people to represent communities and people. They're just not doing their proper job. We've got to make them, as part of our mobilising together, we've got to get the right people into those houses, we've got to make them do their job, and we've got to hold them to account. And at the moment, we're on the back foot. So that's one element. I'm not saying it's the only one.
I'd just like to add... And I heard Sue saying it's not either or. I think it's everything. And it depends on the strategy you need for the particular situation that you're in, and the particular skills that you bring to bear. Some people are bloody amazing at writing fantastic reports. It's not me. But, go hard. Do those fantastic reports and put them into government. I think one of the things that we learned really clearly from our gas field free experience, though, was the people who could speak to government were the people who were affected. You don't want an old, tired, old warhorse like me going to Parliament and telling them what for, because they know who I am. That's pretty obvious, pretty quickly. But you get a farmer who's been on that land for generations, who's a member of the National Party, and is absolutely and completely disgusted by what is being done to him and generations of his family. And they're talking to the local member, and they're talking to the Minister for Energy and Mines and so forth. Those are the people, the women, the men that are on the land, actually giving them the information, putting it right to them. They need to be supported. They need to be empowered. They need to be trained, but they can do it, and they cut through. And that's what makes the organisation work in lots of ways, because they do cut through. They're not, what they really speak to is, you are going to lose your job because people like me are going to oppose you every step of the way, and my family, and all my neighbours, and my community. That gets through. Suddenly they see their $200,000 a year job and their fat pension on the line, because they've never been spoken to by people like that before.
Go hard and go home. Yep. Now I'm just going to special compensation here. The gentleman with the very nice hat is next, but for special reasons. You can explain why.
Yeah, sorry. It seems to me that if I was sitting in this room and listening here, I'd want to know what I actually have to do as what Will is suggesting, which is we have to turn around our emissions and start reducing them. Can you just put your hand up if you've got solar installed? What's that, about 50%, 40%, 60%, 80%? 85, 90? A lot. Well, those guys have got it right. 40% of...
I was going to say, what about the renters?
Hang on. 40%
Yeah.
of our emissions in the Shire are caused by burning coal-fired electricity. And the easiest way to cut those emissions is to install some solar, if you possibly can. Some people can't because they're renting, some people can't because they've got trees in the way, whatever it is. But if you can install solar, and a lot of people have, and a lot of people all over Australia have, I think it's now nearly 20% of households and businesses. But really the fastest, quickest and least expensive way to get those emissions started downwards is install some good solar. Thanks.
I was going to say, stop mining coal, stop approving coal projects. That's the other way.
Yes,
Absolutely.
Mick, can I just make one
Yes, of
quick
course, Tony.
comment
Yes.
to support that with the number of people who put their hand up about who's got solar? People may not realise, again, what Anova's trying to do in the community. During March, I mean, to sell energy, we've got to buy energy. So we've got to buy it before we can then on-sell it. During the month of March this year, 63% of the energy that we on-sold was purchased from rooftop solar.
And Tony, just to address the woman at the front about renters, was that you? Could you just quickly address the issue of renters?
Yes, I can, and indeed I'm a renter at the moment as well, so I didn't put my hand up to have solar. So yeah, Anova's working very hard at the moment on a solar garden concept which will actually allow renters to access the benefits of solar by having a larger panel system sitting on a business's roof that then can be funded by the potential participants in that solar garden model, and they can get a rebate off their electricity bill. So they're actually still having solar, not necessarily on their roof, but they can have solar. It can be portable, so if you move house, your rental property changes, you can take it with you, and you could potentially sell it.
Lovely, thank you. Right. Sir, I'm going to ask you to speak quite close to the microphone.
Thanks. I'm David Millage. I'm a wildlife ecologist. And on a slightly different note, I'd like to ask Will how important he thinks our forests are in terms of mitigating global warming. And shouldn't we be putting all the forests outside the reserve system that we have at the moment aside as thermal refuges instead of just trashing them?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, forests are very important for a number of reasons, and I think you've hit on it. We need well-functioning ecosystems as best as we can maintain and to help the rest of the living world get through this bottleneck. In terms of the carbon story, about 90% of CO2 these days comes from fossil fuels. About 10% comes from land. I think we are the only OECD country that still has significant emissions from land. All the others are actually taking up carbon. The biggest emitters from land are Amazon and some of the other tropical forests. But it's really important. Historically, land has been a bigger emitter in the past, and we have a big deficit of carbon that still needs to come back into the land. The only point I make is you cannot offset fossil fuels by putting carbon in land. It's actually scientifically a different part. It's part of an active cycle. It's important that we keep well-functioning forests and other ecosystems. Savannas store a lot of carbon in soil, for example. But it cannot substitute for action on fossil fuel. You have to do both, and fast.
Thank you. The next person to ask a question. People have been queuing. If they're prepared to let you ask, that's their business, but that's very gracious. Thank you.
Thank you. John Sparks. We've been at the coalface for the last few weeks. For 18 months, we've been approaching the local council and saying, do not cut down this 200-year-old fig tree. The council have taken no notice. For the last 3 weeks, we've chained ourselves to the tree. And we told them if they touch it, it's an item of cultural significance and they'll be fined $1 million. Suddenly, they took notice. We're talking about governments. We're talking about the existing system, about changing that. I've been working on a Bill of Rights for Nature and the value of nature. We told them that the tree was worth so much more than anything that they could do to it. So looking at the value of nature, there is the law of nature, L-O-R-E, where nature is the law. Now, if we look at natural law, that's undisputable. It's accepted by everybody. Then we talk about legal rights. Can you please tell me how we can go from the natural law to the legal rights so that we can then do what we wanted to do and get the tree to act as plaintiff and sue the local council for destroying it?
That's you. That's you.
Thank you.
It's like
Sue, you've got to hold that.
I feel like such a downer, but trees are not going to get legal rights in Australia. It's not going to happen. We had, the paper written in the US in the 70s about standing for trees. I can't even get community groups standing to sue for not just the removal of one 200-year-old fig tree, to take the current New South Wales Forestry Corporation for destroying and honing down and killing animals while they're logging our northeast forest estate. Thousands and thousands of hectares. I can't even get a concerned group of scientists to stand up for that forest. So the thought of trees in my lifetime within this legal system of having rights to sue and being the plaintiff, I think we're much better in terms of a legal project in broadening the rights for communities to bring legal actions to protect trees and to protect the environment. I think that is a much, in my opinion, it's a much more worthy exercise to demanding your rights to go to court, to fight a decision to cut a tree down on the science and the merit of cutting that tree down. Because right now we don't even have those rights.
How do we give nature those rights?
But how is nature going to stand in a courtroom, an anthropocentric, constructed environment where we talk about rights? What is the tree physically going to say to the judge? Your Honour, I'm a tree. It can't happen. So we've definitely looked at, Earth Laws has looked at having environmental advocates for nature, and that's what I'm saying. That's our project. We don't need the tree to have those rights. We need the humans that want to stand up and argue for that tree, based in the transaction of law that we discuss. We don't even have those rights at this point in time in our legal system, and they're the ones we should be really fighting for. We've been fighting since 1998 to get rights for the community to bring legal actions against the Forestry Commission in New South Wales. We still don't have those rights. It was only 2 weeks ago we wrote another submission saying, can we have legal rights of standing for anybody to bring actions against the Forestry Corporation? The National Party are not listening, and they're the ones holding the portfolio at the moment.
Okay, thank you, Sue. The next question. We've only got about 10 minutes left. If your questions can be brief, that's fantastic. But we'll go now. Thank you.
Cool. Hi, I'm Hannah. I'm an activist and supporter of new economies like hemp and renewable energy. This Saturday is the National Day of Action Against Coal. And nothing's currently planned for this local area. There's other actions happening all over the country. Even though this area's had a really big stronghold in the Stop Adani campaign and obviously different environmental campaigns. And just wondering about more collaboration between new economy businesses such as Innova or political parties and the Greens and these big national days of action and activism against no new coal, and really creating those links more succinctly and visibly.
Have you framed that as a question?
Yeah, I guess for Innova, for example.
How there can be greater interrelatedness between activism and
in
activist
honouring
goals?
systems as a whole.
Okay, that's a fairly encompassing question. Is there someone who'd like to...
Initially it's aimed at me, I think,
okay,
in relation to what Innova can do. And listen, I absolutely understand. We, in the Innova organisation, struggle with that question ourselves. How do we engage better with the community and get involved in these things? So I actually don't have an answer, but I absolutely agree with the question that we need to work, all of the parts of the community, the activism parts, the business parts, the not-for-profit parts, the volunteer parts of the organisation. How do we bring them all together and make us work more coherently? And so I agree with the question. Unfortunately, I don't have the answer.
Okay, thank you very much. The next question, please. And we really have to push along. We've got about 6 or 7 minutes.
Hi, my name's Jenny, and I just want to ask about the political system at the moment. Given that we've got the triple bill, espionage bill that's just gone through, which is appalling, and that it was backed by Labor, even with 60 amendments, and Get Up is saying it's absolutely appalling. Given that the two-party system isn't really working for us, and so just voting out LNP and getting Labor with a balance of power with Greens isn't working. If, as much as I love the Greens, it seems it's stuck at 12%, and hopefully it'll go up, but it seems to me like the structure itself needs, and you've addressed a little bit of that, ways to do that, but are there any other points from the panel about how do we actually address the structural issues with our democracy? We've got maybe an election called in 6 weeks. It's a small amount of time to really address a lot of things before the next electoral cycle.
Can I start with that?
Please.
So, firstly, I hate to be picky and rude, and in all manners of respect, we have actually never yet seen a situation in Australian politics where the Greens actually hold the balance of power where it matters. We've never seen that, so we don't know what that looks like. And in fact, I would sit here and say that given the nature. Taking the nature of Will's, what were the 2 points? The magnitude and the urgency. Magnitude and urgency right now, and being strategic and what we can achieve in the political system. We know we can't tear these houses down. We can't do it because what is it? I mean, that's what the bloody revolution looks like. We don't want that. It's not peaceful. It's not nice. But what we do know is that we've got the system we have right now. In New South Wales, we've actually got an incredible opportunity, and I'm just going to say it, and I'm sorry if it's a bit too political. And that opportunity is right here, under our bums, on this land we stand on. We actually, in New South Wales, have an election in March, and this is only New South Wales politics, not federal politics. We don't know what's happening at the federal level in terms of the election. Right here on this soil, what we have is the state election coming in March 2019. We currently have 3 Greens members in the lower house. One is our own right here. The seat of Lismore is the most marginal seat in New South Wales, along with the Upper Hunter seat. There is a large chance the Greens will win in Lismore. Berejiklian is likely to lose some seats because that's the nature of politics when you've been in that long. Foley is likely to gain seats, perhaps not enough. The Labor Party in New South Wales just isn't quite yet there. We are potentially facing, for the first time in my lifetime anyway, the possibility of the Greens holding the balance of power in the lower house of New South Wales. Given the magnitude of the problems that we have, including climate change, given New South Wales is the biggest coal producer, coal exporter, etc., and the biggest coal advert, and the time that we have to achieve change, I reckon it's worth running for. I reckon it's worth going into bat for. I reckon it's worth all of us getting behind the fact that the Northern Rivers is the focus for the potential balance of power in New South Wales going forward. It's a worthy gig. Maybe I'm dreaming, maybe we're all dreaming, but it's a worthy gig for us to get behind, and it's achievable. It's on our watch and it's on our land. That's a bit of a coincidence, I think, given we are the communities that pioneer change. We have done since the 70s and earlier. We can do it again here.
Okay. Now, I'm going to make my bid for Mr. Unpopularity. I'm going to ask you, sir, to be the last question, and I'm going to ask whether the panel would be okay for people who have been waiting, whether they could approach them afterwards to ask them a question. Would that be okay?
Yes.
So, sir, you're our last question, and then we're going to need to wrap up.
Matthew Lambourne, the magnitude of the problem that Will outlined is pretty daunting, but my assessment is that technically we can deal with it. It looks bad, but we've got the knowledge to deal with it. The problem is the politicians, I can guess what Sue will agree with this, but particularly would he agree that the problem is political, not technical? We can deal with the issue if we put our minds to it.
Yeah, it's political and ideological. It's not technical, it's not science. We have the solutions. Canberra is showing, I want to put in a little plug for Canberra, we'll be 100% renewable in 2 years. Last contracts are signed. And that's a city of 450,000. So you talk about collective action, you can do it. But the most important thing, in my view, is our local legislative assembly, much to the surprise of most of us, passed legislation that we will be totally carbon-free by 2045. So that went through. That's transport, housing, everything. And that's even the dry economists in our legislative assembly said, we can do it, and it's probably going to help our economy actually doing it. So.
Okay, it seems to me that an optimistic comment like that I want to hang on to and let you hang on to as well. I know we have to go. I thank the people who have been waiting and didn't get a chance. But can you hold your applause till the end, and I'll get through our guests whose time and expertise has been so appreciated. Simon Clough, Tony Pfeiffer, Amelia Hicks, Sue Higginson, and of course Will Steffen. Could you thank them all for me, please? I also want to, on behalf of Zero Emissions Byron, of which I'm not a member but I'm a keen supporter, to thank you for coming. I mean, it's really, really great that people in the community that has a lot of knowledge and has a lot of activists, runs on the board, still make the effort on a winter night to come out. It's greatly appreciated. Your demeanour tonight, as always, is wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And am I right in thinking there's a final slide that's going up that has a list of possible things that we might be able to do? That was the idea, but we don't have it. Look, in this room there are so many ideas of what to do. We don't need a slide. But Christabel Munson will read them out. I'm going to say good night and leave you with the wise words of Christabel Munson. Thank you for coming. See you again at our next meeting.
So, take-home actions. Primary objective, stop burning fossil fuels as soon as possible. Install solar panels and batteries if possible, and switch to an affordable EV when available. Vote for the political party which guarantees to take climate action and pushes to end political donations. Ask all your local MPs specifically what action their party will take on climate change to keep below 2 degrees. Divest from fossil fuel investments and from banks who invest in fossil fuels. Join and participate in a local group taking action in Byron, for instance in Byron Shire, like Zero Emissions Byron or Quorum. Switch to a local ethical energy supplier, such as Nova Energy in northern New South Wales. Get involved with a wider campaign taking action. There's a new group called The Next Economy. Sandy Middleton can tell you about that. And Gasfield Free Northern Rivers. Keep up with the news. Subscribe to Renew Economy, daily online climate news. If renting or if panels are a problem because of shade or whatever, join a solar garden to save on electricity bills. Spread the word. Talk to your neighbours and friends. Tell them what you're feeling. Plant trees. Ask Zero Emissions Byron all about our next project. If you've got no time, let someone else do the hard work. Zero Emissions Byron, the Climate Council, Quorum, a lot of us are around here, so come and join. And also, you can always donate. Thank you.
Thank you.